Welcome to the sew along for the Barker Panty, a beginner sewing project from Madeline's book, Sew Lingerie. If you have never sewn lingerie before, this is like your first project. The Barker as well as the Millie Panty from the book are excellent places to start. You get a sense of stretch fabrics, sewing picot elastic, a great project to start off with. In this sew along, I will be going over everything from what fabrics you should use, what pattern pieces you should have cut out for which fabrics, what trims you should have cut out, as well as all sewing steps. What I won't be covering is fit, but good news is that fitting panties so much easier than fitting bras. Now let's get right into it. What fabrics should you have cut out for which pattern pieces? So for pattern piece or for front panty A and back panty B, I have a layer of main fabric as well as a layer of lining fabric. My main fabric is a Lycra. What is super important is that it stretches horizontally. So you can use a two-way stretch, but you have to have the stretch going around the body. For this, I did not spray baste my lining fabric to my main fabric. I left them just not spray basted. For the side panel, which is C, I have a combo fabric, and that is just a layer of stretch mesh. I have been getting this question a lot. What does combo fabric mean? So combo fabric is just like a combination fabric you use in combination with your main fabric, usually for a design effect. So when like you're color blocking, you have your main fabric, which is the main color, and then like your combo fabrics will be like the different colors that you're using. So it's not really a technical term, it's more of like a design term. It's just a combination fabric to use with your main fabric. And your combo fabric can be the same as your lining fabric. A perfect example is for this Barker that I'm sewing for the sew along, my combo fabric, which is just one layer of stretch mesh, is the same fabric as my lining fabric. So you can combine the two. Now, the only trim that you'll need is picot elastic, and all picot means is that there is a picot edge on one side. You can refer to the elastic section in the book for more information on picot elastic. This should be 3/8 of an inch, half an inch wide. I wouldn't go any wider. And then the last thing that you should have cut out is the cotton jersey for the gusset. The first step of sewing the Barker Panty is to sew the vertical seams on the front panel as well as the back panel. You could place your gusset, pin it in place, but you can also do it after this step. I prefer after this step so it just doesn't get in the way when doing this step. Now I'm going to be finishing the seam in a way so that the seam allowances are encased between the lining and the main fabric. This is a fantastic seam finish if you don't have a serger. It's also a fantastic seam finish because on the finished piece you will see the vertical seams on the back panel, and if you don't want your seam allowance showing, this is a nice, very clean way to sew the seam so that it's really nice on the inside. It's a little bit hard to explain, but I want you to just go through the steps, and then when you flip everything out after you sew the seam, you're like, wow. Okay, so what you are going to do is you are going to place your side panels on top of your main fabric. I'm gonna take the main fabric of the center front piece. I'm gonna fold this back just so that I have room to put the other side panel. So right sides together. So right sides of the side panel facing the right side of the main fabric. The lining is totally out of the way. Then you're gonna put your lining on top so that your side panels are sandwiched in between the main fabric and the lining of your center front panel. Then you are going to pin it along the edge through all layers. and then you will sew it with a straight stitch, quarter of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at beginning and ends. First do this one so that you get the hang of it, and then we'll do it to the other seams. Seam is sewn, and now I am going to flip the side panels to the right. Everything's right side out. So as you can see, if I flip this over, the seam allowances are inside between the lining and the main fabric. So it's a really nice way to finish the seam allowances. Okay, so you're gonna do that. So good news is that you finished this seam. Bad news is that now you have to do it to the other seams. So it gets a little bit of like origami trying to figure out how to encase the combo fabric in between it, but watch me pin it in place and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. Of the seams have been sewn, and now you can see that when the panty is face up, you don't see those seam allowances such as a serger and overlocker here and here. So this finish is super nice. Okay, so now let's place the gusset. Pin it in place at top and bottom. If you have a serger, you can serge the top edge and the bottom edge. If you don't, you can just leave the edges raw or unfinished. So I put 4 pins at the top and the bottom, 4 total. Now let's sew picot elastic. The last step is to sew picot elastic to the waistline as well as the leg openings. Picot elastic, just as a refresher, there is a section in the book about elastics. Usually has a plush side, which is like a velvety side, and has a picot edge, and this edge should be facing out, visible on the exterior of the garment when it is finished. Picot elastic as well as fold over elastic, both are sewn in 2 passes. Passet is just another term for step, so it's a 2-step process. The biggest difference is that for picot elastic, you start with right side face up, then you flip it to the wrong side. With fold over elastic, you start on the wrong side and then you go to the right side. So you can start anywhere. I like to start on like the back edge here so that when the panty is facing up, you don't see it. So you're gonna lay the picot elastic down so that the picot is facing in towards the panty and the flat edge of the elastic is aligned with the edge of the fabric. Now if you have like a 3/8 of an inch elastic, it can line up. If you have a 1/2 inch elastic, it will be extending over just a hair. Really doesn't make a huge difference if you want to get super technical, but I like to say perfection is overrated, so. You are going to sew it with a zigzag stitch. Now, the important thing is that your zigzag stitch is super close to the picot edge. What you don't want is you don't want to sew that zigzag stitch down the center, because if it's super close to that picot edge, when you flip it back to the wrong side, the only thing that shows is the picot. You don't have like the rest of the elastic showing. And that's what you want. So first pass is super close to the picot edge. Now, when you get all the way around to the beginning, you are going to overlap your stitches about a half an inch. I'm sorry, you're gonna overlap your elastics about a half of an inch. You don't have to back stitch, just overlap it and stop stitching. First pass or step is sewn. As you can see, my stitches are really close to that picot edge. Not down the center, not along the flat edge, but really close to that picot edge. Now, after you've sewn the first step, if you have any points where your fabric is extending past your elastic, this is where you use your duck-billed scissors and you trim it back. Now the next step is to fold this back and sew the second pass or the second step with your zigzag stitches really close to the flat edge. You can do this with the right side facing up or the wrong side facing up, whatever feels more comfortable to you. If you sew it with the wrong side facing up, you will definitely know that you are getting really close to the edge. But if you want your stitching to look super nice on the outside, you can sew it with the right side face up. Might not get as close to the flat edge as if you were sewing with the wrong side face up, but if your priorities that have like super nice top stitching on the outside, then you can sew it with the right side face up. Second pass of elastic is now sewn. The Barker panty is complete. Let's take a peek at the second pass of the zigzag stitches. Now I sewed with the right side face up so you can see the stitches on the exterior. On my bobbin, I had a light pink. So as you can see, that the second row of stitches is closest to the flat edge. So you can see that there are two rows of stitches. One is on the picot edge, the other is on the flat edge. What I didn't do is sew both passes of zigzag stitches down the center. So that is the end of the sew along. Hopefully, if you're new to bra making, if you're new to DIY lingerie and you're a little bit nervous about getting into the world of stretch fabrics, elastics, and you sew the Barker panty and you feel confident to move on to some of the more intricate projects in the book. The Barker panty is also great because it's an excellent project to practice sewing your elastics. Sewing elastic is a majority of sewing lingerie, and it's really hard to get that feel for how much tension that you should apply to it. So I tell my students all the time, on a weekend, cut out 5 or 6 panties, and after you do your work or whatever you do during the week, spend 45 minutes and just sew the Barker. That way you can become muscle memory so you get the hang of sewing elastics. As always, you can email hello@madeline.com with any questions or pop your comments into the comment section below.